Good evening, folks, family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle Earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast in the world in existence, I promise you, that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores, A-N-T. Give me a follow on Twitter, or follows aren't your thing, that's fine. I always like to give everybody options. I'll gladly take a blank check made out to me. I won't go too crazy in the amount that I'm going to write in for it. But I will be pretty generous because I think I deserve it for a multitude of reasons. While you're there doing the old follow thing or writing that blank check, please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage, to Cover One as a whole. We've got a multitude of shows offering you the best content and analysis when it comes to anything and everything Buffalo Bills. And in my opinion, granted, I'm probably biased, football content in general, helping you to understand the game more, breaking down the X's and O's, the Y's and the how's behind everything. So please rate and review and subscribe. While you're here watching this video, if you're live with us now, as a lot of people are filing in, please drop a like on this video. I know it's corny, but I say it every week, helps us to track and trend in front of more eyes. It helps the algorithms, all that stuff. If you're watching this not live, you're watching it later, drop a like while you're here, all that kind of good stuff, please. And thank you. Also, a please to the person who's my guest tonight. When I asked him on the show, I was like, hey, please join me. And then when he said yes, I said thank you. So nice segue to me on that one. Mr. Kendall Mirsky, as seen on the Air Raid Hour, as seen on the Cover One Film Room, as seen on Twitter, as seen on the new cover of GQ magazine this month. Stud, star, knows his stuff. You rode with me last night on the Film Room, and you were kind enough to join me tonight on Disguise Coverage. Thanks for being here. How you doing?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Back-to-back shows with you. Finally, working up the rapport with apparently my older brother. Apparently people like the energy that we have together. So it's nice to be back on another show with you, and we can keep it moving with that chemistry.
Yeah, I thought the little brother thing was funny.
It was really funny.
Yeah, we get along well and see things in a similar light, which is fun. And I'm excited to get into tonight's episode. So what we're going to do in tonight's episode, Kendall and I are both going to be looking at our top 3 priorities in terms of the positions of need for the Buffalo Bills, and then how we would address those positions in free agency, what particular free agent or free agents we would look towards, the whys, the hows, all that stuff. But before we get into that, as some people in the chat have already mentioned, we got a little bit of some breaking news that happened just before we went live. Mr. John Feliciano tweeted a tweet where just kind of like, hey, it's been great, Buffalo, and then a little peace sign. Then he followed up to a retweet of that to some people saying like a more formal goodbye is on the way. So it would seem that John Feliciano is on his way out from the Buffalo Bills, due to be released, which saves money either way. If he's designated as a pre-June 1st release, it saves the Bills about $3.5 million. If he's designated as a post-June 1st release or trade, but it's most likely going to be a release, it would save about $4.2 million, so about an extra $700K and some change if it's a post-June 1st designation. Kendall, thoughts on Mr. John Feliciano and him potentially not being on the Buffalo Bills anymore?
Kind of mixed bag. I mean, the thing with Feliciano is he's someone you want to like because, he's kind of one of those ride or die guys for Josh Allen and, the protector of Josh Allen in more ways than just being an offensive lineman. So for that reason, he's someone you want to like. He plays with a lot of tenacity and that motor that you want from an offensive lineman, that edge that you want those guys to play with. But it's a mixed bag because, a lot of times when he's on the field, you're looking at him as the reason, Josh Allen's getting hit, or the reason that Devin Singletary's getting hit in the backfield and things like that. So mixed bag. It's nice to get some extra money in the banana stand to spend on.
That's why I'm wearing the shirt.
I figured that was why. But yeah, it's weird because even now that I'm thinking about it, like I didn't have time to prepare for this.
I would say we literally, for everybody to kind of peek behind the fourth wall, I was getting this episode ready. And Kendall comes in. He's like, you saw the news? And I was like, no, I've been in here. And he was like, oh, John Feliciano. And that happened literally like 5-6 minutes before we went live. So we haven't really processed. So continue.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough to process because I'm sitting here with my top 3 positional needs in free agency. And I wasn't prepared to talk about interior offensive line. but now I'm probably going to have to just talk about it authentically and off the top of the head. So it might usurp something and take my top 3, but I'll have to think about it when we get there. So it's definitely an interesting move, makes sense financially, but I'm intrigued to see how the Bills are going to address it prior to the draft.
It's very interesting with the offensive line makeup of this team. I like John Feliciano as like the person and all the intangible stuff he brings from like a locker room perspective and a culture perspective. And we know how, like you mentioned it, how tight he is with Josh Allen. I think like a lot of people make those jokes as like a knock against him. Like, oh, well, because he's only here because they play Call of Duty together and blah, 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 blah. And like we know his limitations on the field, his athleticism, his footwork. Like you can see it diminish over the last several years. And even when he was at his best, he wasn't the most fleet of foot and athletic guard that was out there. But he came back last year on a deal that I didn't love, but I was like, okay, some center guard versatility. We'll see what we get, yada, yada. And it just wasn't a good year for him last year. Ike Bodker steps in as Ford kind of falls out of favor, and then Bodker goes down, and then Ryan Bates steps in and does a good job. And it just kept seeming almost like they just kept throwing more bodies ahead of him.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how if it changes your priorities a little bit, or talking off the top of your head, I don't want to be disrespectful. It doesn't change my priorities because I didn't consider him much for the interior of the offensive line. Like whether or not John Feliciano was there, it doesn't really change my opinion of what needs to be done on the interior offensive line. Now, I will say, obviously it's one less body. So now you need more depth. You also, like from a perspective of, he was somewhat reliable in terms of what was going on in his head. Like he's a reliable guy. He kind of knows where he needs to be. Whether or not he can get there and execute because of his limitations athletically is another question. But it was somebody who in a pinch, I don't know, like you can still be comfortable throwing in a legitimate NFL veteran into an important spot in the interior offensive line. And I was talking to you offline about this when I had Nate Tice on, because Nate spent time with him when Nate was with the Raiders. He mentioned how heady and smart John Feliciano is, which is something I didn't know. And he talked about how good Feliciano was at communicating with the center and IDing protections and assignments and responsibilities. And that's the type of stuff where even if you're not playing, that stuff keeps translating, because Feliciano is one of those guys that when people come off the field, like he's in Mitch Morse's ear. I could see them diagramming and having dialogue on the sideline. So that type of thing will be missed. But from an on the field perspective, I'm not too torn up. For anybody who's just coming in, yes, it seems that John Feliciano is on his way out. I see a question in the chat that says, how much cap space does John leaving save? I mentioned it earlier. I'll mention it again. If he's designated as a pre-June 1st release, it's about $3.5 million. If it's designated as a post-June 1st release, it's about $4.2 million. So either way, I mean, that's a decent chunk of change, $4 million. That's a potential 1 year, $4 million deal for a corner. That's a 1 year, $4 million deal for maybe a depth defensive tackle, or maybe two. Like you kind of play with that money a little bit. Added in with, I don't have the note next to me of the money that the Bills save from AJ Klein. And all of a sudden things are starting to add up. And honestly, I think this is just a series of dominoes. We talked about it on the salary cap spectacular several weeks ago, of how the Bills could make moves in terms of extensions, releases, pay cuts, all that stuff. And we saw a lot of these come in, Klein and Feliciano. And also, I thought the writing was on the wall a little bit with what Brandon Beane said when he was on GR yesterday, talking about how they're down about they're $6 million in the hole, over the cap right now, and how they're strapped and they have to make some moves. And, he's not going to give away anything, but that they have moves to make. The Bills are never one to stand pat. And in order to make moves, they have to clear up cap space. And Feliciano and Klein were two of the most obvious ones. They now both look to be on their way. And I see some people saying Feliciano heading to the Giants with Dable. Oh, people want to trade Beasley. There's a lot of
that. It's that time of year, man.
It is that time. Oh, great comment here from Ned, who's a huge supporter of the show, and we love to see here. Ned says, you got to love Feliciano's attitude and backing of Josh Allen, but he didn't perform last year. And you're right, Kendall. It does make sense financially. And, sad. Eric echoing the same thing. Love Mongo, but he wasn't a starter anymore. It was time to go. Yep.
That's the thing. Over the years, it especially after that extension, you look at it and then what he did the year right after the extension, and you're paying a dude to be replacement level. You literally replaced him twice throughout the year. And whether it was injury or just straight up someone playing better than him, he was replaced, and you're paying him to be a fringe starter. So it just didn't make sense from a financial perspective. And yeah, it is what it is at this point. We wish him the best. I mean, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. Oh, good comment here from Traz. I thought it was 5.1, but I couldn't remember. Traz says they saved about 5.2 mil releasing AJ Klein, so that puts them into the green. Some positive now with some cap space. And yeah, I wish. I think I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think I speak for you and a lot of us here at Cover One and Bills Mafia that we wish John Feliciano the best and wherever he goes to next, and hopefully he can continue on with his NFL career because by all accounts he seems like a pretty good dude and guy that you like to have in the locker room. So best wishes to Mr. John Feliciano, and best wishes to sponsor of this show, One Pie Pizza. Nice segue. I like to pull it out at different times just to be crazy every now and again. Follow them on Twitter at One Pie Pizza WNY. I got a real sweet post coming out for One Pie. They added this legitimately sick buffalo like a statue of a buffalo to the front of their property in front of the shop. It's awesome. I got a picture from the owner. I'm going to tweet it out tomorrow. It's sick. And so that's really cool. But even if you don't care about that, that's fine. Do you care about really good pizza? Do you care about homemade blue cheese? Do you care about good people working on like a quality product and like honing their craft and making something delicious for you to enjoy? Oh, you do? That's fantastic. Go get some One Pie Pizza. Their online menu, their address can be found in the episode show notes here on YouTube. If you're listening on any of the podcasting platforms, same thing. Go to that online menu, get that address, go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Tell them Cover One sent you. I genuinely mean it when I say they are fantastic people. Their product is awesome. They're doing a whole white pizza type thing and different options during Lent. They've done stuff in October for cancer awareness. They've done Toys for Tots and different drives like that. They're active in the community. Like, they're genuinely good people and they make an awesome product. I appreciate the hell out of the partnership that I have with them, and they're delicious in terms of their pizza and their logo sweet. I mention it all the time. Like,
yeah, it is.
It's sick like that. And that's what that statue looks like. It looks like that kind of buffalo, and it's
that's what I was picturing.
Dude,
yeah.
It's real legit. I'm pumped to tweet it out tomorrow. I'll give it some promo and some prime prep. But yeah, you guys know the deal. You know the sponsor. Go get yourself some One Pie. They're fantastic in every way, shape, and form. And now on to the theme of this episode. So, time out. What? Blue cheese is horrible? To each their own. No judgment, I want to say. No judgment. But like all blue cheese, or maybe did you have a bad experience one time?
That's my thing with blue cheese.
You don't like blue cheese either.
I'm in the boat where I have to have the right blue cheese. Okay, I don't prefer. I like, everyone's gonna ostracize me for this, and I already know this. But I am ranch over blue cheese. The difference is,
this is really
if it's good blue cheese, I'll pick the blue cheese. I just need to know that it's good blue cheese first.
Got it.
I'm very. There's a lot of variance for me with blue cheese. And I think that's kind of the case with blue cheese in general. There's a lot of variance when it comes to the quality of it.
I wish I had known you were a ranch over blue cheese guy. I wouldn't have asked you to be on the show. I'm terribly disappointed. No, it's fine. Oh, this is one I echo. I will say, as we get off track here, Jason said some people don't like the chunks in the blue cheese. I am one of them. I don't like the chunks. Too. They creep me out. I'm not a fan. I'm not about that chunk life in the blue cheese, but I do think blue cheese is delicious. But the good news, Ronald, if you don't like blue cheese, that's fine. Just go get some One Pie Pizza and don't get blue cheese. It's still great. That's how great it is. You don't need the pizza to be a vehicle or a medium for the blue cheese. Just enjoy the great sauce to cheese ratio, the cup of char pepperoni, or whatever toppings you want. Everybody wins. We all win. Hopefully, in 2022, the Bills win a Super Bowl and a championship. But in order to do that, Kendall, they have to make some tweaks and adjustments to this roster. We saw a group that, distracted again. Dolph Ziggler is NXT champ. I haven't watched WWE in a long time because the product has gone bad. Same thing with NXT. I did not know that Dolph Ziggler was NXT champ. So, Earl, I don't have a thought right now, but I appreciate you asking. Thank you very much. Backtrack, Kendall. We saw this Bills team almost kind of do everything they needed to in order to beat the Kansas City Chiefs and advance to a second straight AFC championship. They come off of back-to-back AFC East titles. Josh Allen has ascended. He's in the conversation for the best quarterback in the NFL. Like even the most harsh of critics are kind of putting him up there. Like there's legitimate debate. You'll get several people in lists who are putting Josh Allen over Mahomes and over anybody else. The Bills are real. The Bills are a championship caliber team, playoff caliber, legitimate Super Bowl contender, anything and everything. But they have some work to do just on their own, let alone add it in with the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be around again in 2022. The Cincinnati Bengals are going to be around. The Los Angeles Chargers, a team that I have mentioned that I was afraid if they got a quarterback, what they could be. The Denver Broncos are going to be real. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Patrick, Javonte Williams, Garrett Bowles is a very good offensive lineman. Justin Simmons is one of the best safeties in football. Patrick Surtain, the second as a rookie last year, was already like one of the top 15 corners in the league. He's going to get better. They got Bradley Chubb. They got some studs and some dudes in Denver, right? And now they get Russell Wilson, who's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. They're a very real team. This AFC is a gauntlet and a rough conference, and all of a sudden a conference where everybody has a friggin' quarterback. Now that the Bills finally have one, everybody has one too. But in order to contend with those teams and get over the hump against those teams and be able to advance to a Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, this good Bills team needs to make certain tweaks. They have to get better in certain areas. So as we start to dive into, priority one and our free agent targets, Kendall, I want to get your thoughts kind of overall. Where do you think this Bills team is? Like, how much tweaking and moving do you think needs to be done? Are you looking more overall, before we get into our targets and players, are you looking more for certain, depth or little tweaks? Or are you looking for like major kind of upgrades? What's your thought process on this Bills team heading into 2022?
I don't want to say I'm only looking for depth and tweaks, but I definitely want to add around the edges. I think that's not literally the edge position.
So just edges. Yes.
But I want to round off those jagged edges, if that makes any sense. I think
makes sense.
the prevailing thought for me is, with some tough coaching decisions in the final 13 seconds and how all that execution played out, the Bills were 13 seconds away from getting into the second straight AFC championship game. And in that sense, to me, it tells me this team was technically over the hump. If it doesn't, like, from a roster construction standpoint, like, the pieces were in place to win that game. It just came down to some little things that went wrong. So I'm not here to think that we're one player from getting over the hump. There's so much out there about, the Bills are one piece away from winning the Super Bowl. And philosophically speaking, I'm really never in the mindset that one player, if it's not a quarterback, that one player is going to get you over the hump. I think one player helps you get over the hump, but they are not going to be the reason, especially with the way the Buffalo Bills play, the 1/11th mindset, all of that kind of stuff. It's a team game. You just got to build around the team holistically, and you can't focus too much on one position group. You got to make sure every position group is at least average, at least sufficient, and then you want to have more than a few that are great. And I think that's where the Bills are in a good position. We have a great secondary, despite, the injury to Trey White and him hopefully coming back in early November. It is still a great secondary with the coaching and everything there. So do I want to build on the edges of that group? Yeah, I want to round it out. I want to make it better, but I'm not just looking at depth guys. I'm not just looking at guys that can play in a pinch when someone gets injured. I'm looking at guys that can, help out while Trey is injured. So Dane Jackson isn't CB1 come September, because that would be a problem. So I'm kind of the mindset where we don't need any major overhaul changes. We don't need to ship out guys that did good stuff for us last year to clear up cap, to make a big move for Devontae Adams and things like that. It's just build on what is there, because what is there is great, and it's gotten us to be the odds favorite to win the Super Bowl in the AFC East, or the AFC conference right now. So that's why I'm like, everyone looks at the Bills highly. Why are Bills fans looking at the team different than national perception. And I think that's kind of the weird part about the fans having that critical lens on just their favorite team. So I'm not
Mhm.
of the mindset that major changes need to be made. I think some small improvements could go a long way.
Oh, I like the way you said that. I'm in a similar mindset with a slight tweak from myself. I think there's my whole theme for this offseason that I've said multiple times now. My whole theme for this offseason has been the Bills' ability to play rock, paper, and scissors. This is something,
Mhm.
second name drop of the show for him, Nate Tice, and I spoke about. He alluded to it when talking about the Bills' offense when they didn't have a pivot towards the middle of
Yeah.
the year when there
Yeah.
was no run game. It was just spread offense, right? And the idea is, you need to be able to have more than just your fastball. If we want to go with the baseball analogy, you got to be able to throw off speed. You need a breaking ball. You need to change up. You need to be able to locate on all sides of the plate.
Mhm.
And the rock, paper, scissors, shoot thing is, or just rock, paper, scissors. I'm already thinking of the game rock, paper, scissors, shoot. You need to be able to throw all three. Like you can win playing rock, paper, scissors if you just throw rock, right? You can win. It's
Of
small odds,
course.
but you can still win. But your odds go up
Mhm.
significantly if you can also throw paper and if you can also throw scissors. So if you throw rock and somebody throws scissors, boom, you're good to go. What happens if that other team also throws rock? Or what happens if they throw paper? You need to be able to throw scissors. That's been my theme for this defense as a whole. I think the
Mhm.
offense finding success in the run game, we saw the difference in the back end of the year having that pivot, that ability to play rock, paper, scissors. I think the defense needs that same thing. So it's been my theme this offseason. I said it multiple times on this show. I want scheme versatility from the corner two position. No disrespect
Mhm.
to Levi Wallace. I want a two gapping presence at defensive tackle. Like I think those are
Yeah.
like upgrades to me. I want a
Yeah.
proven pass rusher on the edge, right? But a lot of it, to your point, I think it's just like functional depth and smoothing out those rough edges, not the literal edge position, like you said. Adding that functional depth, adding that versatility. Like my whole thing, it doesn't need to be. I don't think the Bills need to break the bank and get J.C. Jackson or
Mhm.
Devontae Adams or Chandler Jones or Ndamukong Suh. If they got one of those guys, would I take it? Yeah, most
Right.
definitely. But the Bills' formula is close. You don't need to tweak the entire recipe. You just need to add a little bit of some
Mhm.
seasoning here or there. Maybe let it simmer a little bit or stir it or just do some kind of different things.
Yeah.
I don't think they're far away. They're still a very good team. They just need certain tweaks and adjustments and additions to an already solid recipe and core that they've already got.
Yeah.
And so within that vein, let's lead right into it. So Kendall, and also actually I should say all of you who are joining us live. Oh, appreciate you, PJ, saying well said, Anth. All of you here with us live, and there's a lot of you. You guys have been doing it already, so you already know. But what are your thoughts as we start to go with our priority one and who we want? Let us know what's your priority one. Or if we pick a position grouping, who do you like at that position grouping? What do you think about ours? We love the engagement here on Cover One. You guys know how we do on Disguise coverage. Part of the reason why we usually go long on this show, I try to bring as many thoughts and comments
Yeah.
into the show as possible so we can go back and forth and have some good dialogue. So let's keep that up, getting your thoughts and comments and questions and concerns and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to lead off with Kendall here. So, what's your number one position of need and priority on this Bills roster and why? And then who are you looking towards in free agency?
So I'm gonna answer it in kind of a backwards way. My
Okay.
number one priority is Harrison Phillips. I've said it all
Hmm,
off season. Like he's just to me, he is
okay.
the priority. I think the position group is obviously interior defensive line, like you said, getting someone who can two gap, who can help out the linebackers, stay clean, and hopefully allow them to one gap and play a little bit more
Mm,
downhill and decisive so they don't have to read where the ball carrier is going because they have to two gap, all of
mm,
that kind of stuff. Having a plugger would be huge. But right now, say we don't re-sign Harrison Phillips. Right now, we're
mm,
looking at a roster with Ed Oliver, Eli Anku, and Star. But like, is Star coming back? I think Star is financially locked in, but
yeah.
is he going to make the decision to come back and play football? Because there's rumblings out there that he may retire.
Yeah.
So you look at it from that perspective, and it's like, we have to do everything we can to prioritize getting Harrison Phillips back into Buffalo. And obviously, once he got a little bit more healthy from that dinged up knee that he
Mm,
suffered in, I want to say the Chicago game in the preseason,
yeah.
really once he got back on it, he was really good.
It looked
Him and
kind of gnarly.
Oliver.
There were questions
It
about like, oh
was.
my God, is he going to be down again for missed time? I remember going to the open practice and we were all just like staring at him running like sprints and reps to see
And it
how the
was the
brace
same
was
knee,
going.
right?
Yeah, it was that same left knee, which
Yeah.
he also tore his ACL in 2015, in
Yeah.
addition to having the knee injury to it again in 2019. So his left knee has taken
A lot.
a decent beating over the last like 6-7 years, in
I
addition
gotta
to just the
imagine,
regular workload
yeah,
of an
they've
NFL.
taken a lot of muscle out of one of his hamstrings at this point to fix his
Oh God,
ACLs.
I can't imagine.
I know it's nuts. But anyways, that's kind of the point with Harrison Phillips, with how much he grew this year once he got healthy, and how great him and Ed Oliver just fed off of each other. You know, that
Mhm.
that one's the aggressor, one is the occupier, and Phillips being the occupier was so important for Ed Oliver. And getting someone like Harrison Phillips in free agency, this isn't necessarily the player that I'm going to spotlight, but it's my number one priority is re-signing him. Re-signing him would make it easier to find in free agency or the draft. It doesn't necessarily have to be a one tech at that point.
Mm.
When you get Harrison Phillips back on the roster, the need doesn't become one tech only. It becomes getting more guys in that room at the defensive tackle position, because we need someone to spell Ed Oliver. It can't just
Mm.
be Ed Oliver at the 3 tech position. So I think there's going to be an addition to the 3 tech position at some point this offseason, whether it's free agency or the draft. So I think Harrison Phillips is a big, big part of that. But the actual player that isn't on the Bills that I would be targeting is Derek Noddy, who we talked about a little bit
Oh.
in the film room a few weeks back.
Okay.
Only 26 years old, so you got youth on his side in that way. Hopefully, you're not signing him to a similar like Vernon Butler type deal because he's 26 years old, and that's kind of like my main thing with Pause. It's like, just because he's 26 doesn't mean we have to pay him a lot, because
Right.
he's been a rotational guy, someone who comes in on rundowns, but he's been good on rundowns. He's capable of reading, reacting in the hole, stacking and shedding to make plays. And you're not going to get a lot out of him as pass rusher. But what he does in the run game is good. It is sufficient plus, and it would add a lot to this group, especially if Star weren't to come back. Even if Harrison Phillips comes back, then you have a 3-headed rotation at 1 tech between Noddy, Phillips, and Anku. So you have that completely squared away if Star goes away and those 2 guys are brought back, and those would probably be under 10 million combined if you were to re-sign Phillips and sign Noddy. I'd be shocked if that eclipses 10 million cap hit in the first year. And then from there, you move on to the draft and you find yourself someone to spell at Oliver at 3 tech in the rotation. And I mean, it's a lot easier to find 3 techs than it is to find viable 1 techs in the draft.
Yeah, that's very fair. Yeah, unless you're gonna go with Jordan Davis, who everybody seems to think is the greatest prospect ever, or like the most overrated prospect ever. I'm torn here because I'm going to comment on what you said. I have defensive tackle as one of my priorities, but it's not number one. I'm going to speak on it after. I'm going to keep it in the theme. We'll keep it because I got the banner up there. Keep it nice and cut and dry. But I'm going to comment on what you said. I agree to a large part on everything. I like Noddy. You know, we had gone over him, like you said, in the film room, along with several other guys. I just think that position of need, that 2-gapping defensive tackle piece, is so important. And what I like what you said, and this is something I'm going to touch on when I get into it, whether it's my number 2 or number 3 priority, who knows? I guess we'll see. Stay tuned. It doesn't have to be the huge splash. It doesn't have to be like, go out and get Aaron Donald, go out and get Vita Vea. Like, it doesn't have to be that. It can be a rotational guy. They just need to have somebody in the grouping that can occupy that role. Like, that's it. Like, it would be the same if the Bills were lacking a vertical threat on offense. You don't have to go out and get Tyreek Hill. If you did, cool, but just get somebody who can occupy and live in that space, somebody who can provide that functional depth, who can provide that, or I shouldn't say functional depth, who can provide that functional role in the personnel grouping. So I would love it if the Bills got cool, if they got Jordan Davis, awesome. If they got Travis Jones, who I like a lot, and if they got him in the 2nd round, or, you know, initially we were thinking, 3rd round. Now it looks like he's going to be a 2nd round guy. I would love that, but it doesn't have to be the biggest draft capital investment or the biggest monetary or, you know, financial investment. But that position, that 2-gapping defensive tackle, that role needs to exist in this group because, like you mentioned, it doesn't exist right now. Edmonds and Milano have to work so hard two gapping themselves. Taron Johnson has to work harder, coming to fit the runs. And then you've got Ed Oliver, who sees, I think, the 5th highest double team rate amongst defensive linemen,
Just
which is
shouldn't be
unreal.
happening.
It shouldn't be happening, period, but especially to a defensive tackle who weighs 287 pounds. That's not what you want to see. And then, like you mentioned, you started talking about the roster of defensive tackle. It's Ed. It's Ilianku, who I actually really like a lot.
Yeah, he played well this year.
Yes, I like what he does. And then, like, what else do you got? Because Starr is a huge question mark, because even if he comes back, you don't know what you're going to get. This is super funny. Ned threw out a name. That's going to be super funny, Ned, and I'm going to tell you why that's super funny when I talk about defensive tackle. Well done, Ned. It's like he's in here peeking at my notes. Yeah, like that position grouping needs to be addressed because it's a domino effect for the rest of the defense. That's one of those positions where if you add that role, it makes that individual group, defensive tackle, better and deeper, but it has a domino effect of how it helps others get unlocked a little bit. And all of a sudden it makes Tremaine Edmonds' job a little easier, Milano's job a little easier, the safeties coming from depth, Taron Johnson, your edge rushers, Ed Oliver. It has a domino effect in a positive way of how it can help the rest of your defense. So I'm a fan of that being your priority number one. And I like your target. And I think what's also exciting about defensive tackle is with what we're looking for somebody to fill that role, there's a lot of options in free agency that aren't going to break the bank. It's not a scarce market. It's not a heavy financial market. You can get a quality dude on like a 1-year, $4 million deal, maybe even less, or, like a 2-year, $8 million, 9.5, something like that. Like there's affordability in this role that the Bills need, which is exciting. My priority one, I don't think it'll come as any surprise to anyone. Although I was torn. I came close to putting defensive tackle as number one, specifically that 2-gapping defensive tackle. I came very close. But it's still corner for me.
Yeah.
As of right now, it's a very scary thing. Tre'Davious White is hurt. But even say Tre'Davious White wasn't hurt, right? The cornerback grouping as it stands is Tre'Davious White, Taron Johnson, Cam Lewis, Dane Jackson, Nick McLeod, Tim Harris, and Elijah Griffin. Tre'Davious White is hurt. That means if we go into the season right now, your starting outside corners on the Buffalo Bills are Dane Jackson and Cam Lewis. Maybe Nick McLeod. Like maybe a lot. I don't want to play any of these maybes because I don't like them. No disrespect. These guys are NFL players. I like where their head's at. I like the depth. Not comfortable with them as starters, right?
Yeah.
Trey is going to take time to come back. I don't think it's realistic to think he's going to be back for the regular season, especially with how far the Bills want to go, especially with it being a 17-game season. You're not rushing back your best defensive player, especially at a position where you can't hide a knee injury as a corner. It's not like it's not like a shoulder where it's like, okay, you can nurse it. It's not like Eric Weddle playing safety in the Super Bowl where he tears his pec and he's like, okay, I can adjust a little bit. Nah, if one of your wheels are busted as a corner, you're done. You're constantly planning and turning and torquing and bursting and doing different moves that all involve knee functionality and knee health. And I got to call a timeout right now because we got a super chat from Silas, who is a regular viewer of the show. Silas, appreciate you as always. Thank you so much for the super chat, my man. Super chat. I don't know why I merged those words. Thank you very much for that, Silas. Really appreciate it, man. Your support, as always. It's awesome. I'm going to read the comment here. Silas says we need to address a space eater at defensive tackle and a serviceable DB in free agency so we can maximize our draft with best player available picks in the interior offensive line, strong side linebacker, and another DB. Oh, and bring back Fitz and T-Mobile. You want to bring them both back?
Both.
Man, that's a I would like that quarterback room. But what I think is interesting with what Silas says here, a lot of it connects into what we're saying, like that defensive tackle need, that defensive back need. I think people need that piece, that functionality that doesn't exist right now in that group. And then also, he mentioned the interior offensive line. That's very real, especially with the Feliciano news, like we talked to lead off the show. But even before that, the Bills can get better at both guard spots. They can also get younger and plan for the future more at both guard spots. So that's definitely there as well. And then, I don't know if I'm going to go with strong side linebacker, but I'm okay with adding a little more depth to that group and shoring some things up. And then another DB, I'm never going to be upset at more defensive backs. And then Silas and Ron both say Booth. I like Andrew Booth from Clemson. I would not be upset if he were in a Bills uniform come draft time. But thank you, Silas. Really good comment, and thank you very much for the donation. But yeah, continuing on that, corner's scarce. We know how important it is for the Bills with what they have on the roster. And even if all those guys came back, even if Levi came back, there's still that scheme versatility piece that I feel like we have beaten down so much this offseason. That ability to run different coverages, different games. Part of my thinking with the 13 seconds, if Trey is out there, I think it's a different way that they play those last 13 seconds. And that's no disrespect to Levi or anyone else. And it could be wrong, right? But that influence things. They know the limitations of who they have, right? And what they have. And I want a guy on this team who, if Trey goes down, it's not a huge drop off. You can mitigate that loss a little bit, right? I want a guy who can play man coverage to a successful degree. I want a guy who can also function in zone. I want a guy who can change it up and maybe kick inside and take a guy all the way across the field. Scheme versatility from multiple looks, multiple phases, somebody who can cover big receivers, small receivers, tight ends, anything like that. I got to stop again. I got to stop this narrative. Ryland says McCreary is too small and he has tiny short arms. Fair. The tape is amazing.
Yeah.
I would take McCreary right now, hands down, in round 1, and I got absolutely no qualms with it. His technique, his hands, his feet, his hips, he is a stud. He's a legitimate lockdown corner who can play some zone. Not the most experienced with it, but he can if you watch the tape. But his man coverage is legit. Watch him run stride for stride with Jameson Williams and lock him down. Watch him cover Jahan Dotson. Oof. I will not not handling that McCreary slander tonight. No, sir. But in that vein, again, corner, what they need, scheme versatility. I mentioned it in our film room episode a couple weeks back. I'm still on the train. I want Bryce Callahan.
Yeah, he's still there.
He's still there for me. And here's 2 reasons why, right? Because he's played a lot of slot, and I think people primarily think of him as a slot, which he can play outside, which is really why I want him. But let's think about that slot piece, right? Taron Johnson, very aggressive. His role is tremendously important. Get some insurance for Taron Johnson by bringing in Bryce Callahan, because if not, you're looking at Cam Lewis. No disrespect. I'm not the most confident in that. But Bryce Callahan has that ability to kick out outside. And when he does kick out outside, he's got some very impressive numbers. So he was primarily used as an outside corner in 2020. Also in 2020 and 2016, he played outside. The majority of the rest of his career, he was majority slot, but he flip-flops. He's got both in that game in his package. So in 2020, when he was used as an outside corner, he had a 46.9 passer rating against, which was the lowest in the entire league with at least 100 cover snaps. He was in man coverage 36.2% of the time. For reference, Marshawn Lattimore, same exact numbers. Tre'Davious White that year in 2020, he was in man coverage 30% of the time, so 6 percentage points less. Also in 2020, as an outside corner, he had a 53.8 reception percentage, which was the 11th lowest out of the 153 corners that qualified with at least 100 cover snaps. So 11th lowest reception percentage. Fun fact for you, which you'll like, number 1 in 2020 was your boy Casey Hayward with a reception percentage of 48%.
We'll get to that later.
Ooh, wink, wink. And for reference, Tre'Davious White's reception percentage in 2020 was 63%. The biggest issue with Callahan, the injury history, but it's also kind of why it's a benefit, because I think you can get him for somewhat of a bargain.
Right.
He's coming off of a 2021 where he had an average annual value in his contract of $6.2 million, a contract that was reworked because of the injuries that he had after he signed that deal multiple times in Denver. I think he's somebody that could be gotten similar to how the Bills got EJ Gaines, somebody who had an injury history but adds that depth, adds startability, someone who's reliable. He's got a connection now with the Bills coaching staff. And I think him coming off those injuries, he adds that affordability. I also still want to pair him with a round 1 or round 2 corner, or at worst, like a round 3. I want to pair him with that because of that injury history. I also think even if you platoon him, that's even better. Cut down on the potential injury risk, and you platoon him with a young guy. You bring that young guy along. His tape is really strong. He fits a need. He adds some versatility and some depth and some insurance at nickel. not crazy small, but he is on the smaller side. 5'9", 188 pounds, runs a 4.40, arm length of 30 and 5/8, since everybody's obsessed with arm length. For reference,
Checks that box.
checks that box. For reference, Tre'Davious White has 32 and 1/8 inch arms, so a little longer, but Callahan still checks the box. We went over him in the film room. His tape is so strong. He does it against a variety of receivers. You can watch him cover Jakeem Grant, who's a jitterbug low 4.4 receiver. And then you can watch him cover Mike Evans, and you can watch him cover Darren Waller. And I'm not saying he's the best corner in the world, but he can hold his own against a variety of those guys, shapes, sizes, routes. So he's up there for me when it comes with corner. And even if it wasn't him, there's several guys I like. We went through. I don't mind Witherspoon. I don't mind Dante Jackson. I know Eric likes Sidney Jones. I like some of the things that he showed there. I'd also be fine if the Bills decided, hey, we're going to break the bank, and the veteran that came to us was J.C. Jackson, and we're going to sign J.C. Jackson. I'd be like, okay, I just need this position group to be reinforced.
Yeah.
We need legitimate scheme versatility and startability at corner. We also need depth. So even if the Bills sign J.C. Jackson or whatever, I'm making it up, even if that happens, they still need to draft a corner. They still need to add youth and depth to this corner grouping. And given how important this secondary is, given that you have to go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs and the Chargers and the Bengals and the Denver Broncos, that's going to be a legit thing. And even the Dolphins, too. Jalen Waddle. What happens if he goes on that side? Cool. I want somebody who can cover Jalen Waddle man-to-man. All these types of scenarios and schemes. It adds another weapon to your arsenal. That's why it's my number one, and that's why he's my number one target.
Can't hate it. I got to be honest. It segues us perfectly to number two, because cornerback is my number two priority.
Cool. I love that you said that, because then I can just switch the graphic, and now it says priority number two.
It's that simple. You were talking about how, you kind of had some internal struggles with what to pick at number one. Obviously, how much you love your cornerbacks, but how much we need that plugging two gapper. Mm-hmm. So it was tough for you to pick one versus two. And I just happened to flip the coin on the other side. I had defensive tackle first and cornerback second. I think it's extremely close, but that's just kind of the way it boiled down to me.
And I'm also fine with that. That's even gotten into my head now with how much I love the secondary and want a corner. I've even gone on and said, I think defensive tackle might be a little important. I think if those are your top two in some way, shape, or form, you're smooth sailing.
Exactly. What I should have mentioned with defensive tackle, and I kind of alluded to it, but I didn't talk about it completely, and you definitely just talked about it there. The overarching theme of pretty much everything in free agency that I want from the Bills is getting someone that enables flexibility for the draft. And that's what Brandon Beane loves to do. Mm-hmm. You want to get someone that allows you to fill out that position with depth as a starter or just a depth role, but someone that's not disabling you from drafting the same position. So when I said drafting or re-signing Harrison Phillips and still maybe even signing Derek Noddy, that still has a window open for drafting a day 3 tech guy. There's still a window open. It doesn't disable you from doing that.
And that would be same thing for me with if the Bills got Callahan, I'd be like, sweet. I would still love Trent McDuffie or Roger McCreary in round one. I'm fine.
And that's my philosophy with all of these guys. Honestly, J.C. Jackson's probably the only one where it's you still make the point where we need depth regardless at cornerback. Yeah. But the financial side of things, I'm not going to go double dip and now get a first round cornerback because we just got J.C. freaking Jackson. We don't need to go get a day one corner now. Now it's we need to make sure we have some influx of youth, but it doesn't need to be a day one selection. So that's kind of the only difference there. And obviously we're kind of jumping the realism spectrum on the J.C. Jackson thing, but it's still
everybody's going to come away from this and be like, Anthony and Kendall think the Bills should sign J.C. Jackson.
Someone tell Greg.
Oh my God.
But anyways, I agree with everything in terms of your setup for the cornerback position. Obviously the Trey White stuff, all that. There needs to be depth on the outside, and on the inside, I do feel comfortable with if Taron Johnson gets hurt, knock on wood, I'm okay with the depth piece being Cam Lewis. But I like the idea of having Bryce Callahan with that inside-outside versatility where he can play outside, but if Taron gets hurt, then you have someone who can play inside, and then you just have to find someone to fill the spot on the outside. So I like that idea. So where I'll go is kind of what we alluded to. I have two guys that I want to talk about.
Okay.
The first one is Casey Hayward, like we alluded to.
Your boy.
He's 33 years old, so that's like the biggest qualm with him at this point. You know, he was a guy who had that reactive athleticism where he could man up dudes. Like no problem, he could man up dudes, and he had the technique to and the processing to play zone coverage. And then as he's gotten older, he's kind of gotten into more who is it, Gus Bradley schemes where he's just heavy zone.
Yeah, cover
Heavy
3 all
zone.
day.
Yeah. So and the Bills don't run a ton of cover 3, but we run zone. So we'll run cover 3 when we have to. But he has so much experience in zone, and having a guy with that veteran presence while Trey is out is so important to me. And he's someone I think could immediately come in and play cornerback 1, and then you have an option in Dane to be that cornerback 2, or whoever gets drafted. You have a nice competition there between whoever gets drafted. And then when Trey comes back, when and if that is, you can push over Hayward to 2, and Dane Jackson becomes that depth piece. He becomes that role player that can come in dime packages or whatever it is, you know? So that's why I'm so big on Casey Hayward, because he has the experience and he's shown the ability to play zone capably, and he can fill that CB1 in the time being. And the nice part about Casey Hayward is because of that age, because he's going to be 33 years old at the start of the season, it's probably not going to cost that much. There's probably not going to be a lot of people banging on that door like, yeah, we need you to play significant
when
snaps.
he got signed last year by the Raiders, it was late in the season. It was almost like preseason time, because we were clamoring for him here at Cover 1. We were like, Casey Hayward's still there, sign Casey Hayward. So yeah, like that's a very good point too.
It's the second coming of that thing. A lot of this offseason sounds a lot like last offseason, because it's the idea that we're so close. The core is there. The core is built. The core is strong. We just need to, like you said, add the spices, let it simmer a little bit, let it marinate.
Yeah,
you know, so that's kind of what's going on right now. And I think Casey Hayward is one of those spices that can help round out the cornerback position for the time being. Hold down the fort for when Trey gets back, and then you got a really nice duo there. And then think about adding a cornerback that gets to learn from Trey White and Casey Hayward. Like that's beautiful, on top of obviously the coaching prowess that we have in the secondary with developing secondary players in this Buffalo Bills defense. So that's my first guy. Second guy is someone you talked about a little bit, Tequila Witherspoon.
Okay.
And the thing with him is mostly the athleticism and the size and the length, all that stuff. It's so appealing.
His
with
press
this
ability.
It's so appealing. And it's not necessarily a guy that's like, oh, he's got that change of direction skill where he's going to be able to stick with anyone and press. Like, he has the recovery speed, but I don't know if he has the foot quickness to like to catch up in the short area to some guys, and that could get him in trouble.
Inside release routes, and some slants and digs and overs,
stuff like that, he could get in trouble. But it's about finding ways to use rock, paper, and scissors, and he does that to an extent. Probably not as much as some other guys out there on the market, like a Dante Jackson. But I think because he's so good in zone and all of his traits translate so well to zone, I think the floor for what you want from him is there.
Yeah.
And there's still something like knocking on the door about his man ability that is intriguing to me. And also the fact that he's bounced around from team to team. He's another value play. He's another guy you can get for $4 to $5 million in the first year cap hit. So those are the two guys I'm looking at the cornerback position. Huge need. Honestly, it's 1B. Like, priority 2 is not a thing. At this point, it is 1A, 1B, and it is my 1B. It's cornerback.
I'd be fine with either of those guys as well. I wanted Casey Hayward last year. I was yelling for him or Steven Nelson. Like, give me someone added
for a while too.
Like, give me one of those guys at that point last year, and I'll take Witherspoon and I'll put him in man coverage and press man all day and be like, use your length and jam the absolute hell out of whoever you come against every single time. That one clip that we showed, granted it was against KJ Osborne, but the pick 6 against Minnesota where he just jams the ever-loving hell out of Osborne, reduces the angle, picks it, and almost houses it. Yeah, his tape is strong. Give me somebody traitsy like that, and it's
Yeah.
hard to argue with a guy with that size, with that kind of length, with that functionality in zone, but that he has some traits that could work in man. Very fair. Very fair
Forgot to
in there.
mention he's only 27, or at
Good
least he
call.
will be 27 at the start
He's
of
still
next
young. I would
season.
say, yeah, he just came out of Colorado, I think like 4 years
Yeah.
ago
Yeah, it
or
wasn't
5
too
years
long.
ago.
He was
Yeah.
probably like a little bit older when he was drafted.
Yeah.
I think he's like a year older than Levi, who was also kind of old
Okay.
coming out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still young. It's still 27. You're technically entering your athletic prime at 27 years old. So
Fair.
sign me
Yeah.
up.
Very fair. Sign me up. And I like where your head's at too in terms of how you're addressing it. And I think it's similar to, again, I'm not just saying it, I like it because it jives with what I'm saying, but somebody mentioned in the chat, Hayward's age or is he's a little older. I think our idea is whoever we sign in free agency is going to be like I don't want to say rotational guy, I mean it disrespectfully, but a guy who is almost like a bridge guy, and then you still
In a
get a
way,
young
yeah.
guy and then bring that young guy along. You're not just, even if you get somebody, even if you get, again, in my eyes, even if you got McCreary or McDuffie or Booth at like 25 somehow, some way, I'm not completely comfortable just rolling those guys out fresh
Right.
as corner one. Like, I'd like them to be able to rotate a little bit. Give me some of that Levi Kevin Johnson rotation with a veteran. So throw me a Casey Hayward with a Roger McCreary. Throw me in a Kella Witherspoon with a Trent McDuffie, or same thing with like Bryce Callahan. So you merge those two kind of things. And at the same time, again, you still need to keep acquiring players because you need that depth, because this is a thin grouping at corner for the Bills. So yeah, like we said, my number two, I alluded to it earlier, it's defensive tackle for me. For everything that I mentioned earlier, for everything that you said, I'm not going to go too crazy into why, because we already talked about why defensive tackle, why a two gapper. But my guy that I went with, which made me laugh earlier when Ned said it, I'm going with Austin Johnson from the New York Giants, formerly of the Tennessee Titans. I really like his ability to anchor down. He can control the middle. He does those, that drop knee that I think is so sexy when defensive tackles do that on double teams. They just drop that knee and anchor. What I also really like about him is he's got this innate ability, and you see it from like good guys. You see it from offensive linemen a lot when they anchor and they get like wrenched back, but they're able to like contort and they can brace as they
Yeah.
get wrenched back. He does that from the defensive tackle position when he's getting hit with double teams from different angles. His ability to change his surface area and torque that upper body and hold at the point of attack, I really like it from him. And his average annual value in 2021 was $3 million. So I don't think he's somebody that you're going to break the bank. I don't think he's somebody that's going to cost more than $5 million a year. Some numbers for him: 333 run defense snaps in 2021. And here's some fun numbers. He was 16th out of 164 defensive tackles who had at least 50 run defense snaps. He was 16th out of 164 defensive tackles in stop percentage. Stops are tackles on first down that hold the ball carrier to 40% or less of the line to gain. Tackles on second down, that's 50% or less. And if you make a tackle on third and fourth down, that doesn't allow a first down. So he was 16th. He also had 34 total stops, which was tied for sixth out of 164 defensive tackles. He had 42 tackles, which was tied for eighth amongst all defensive tackles. And he had 21 pressures, including 3 sacks, which is cool for a two-gapper who's not meant to rush the passer.
Yeah.
And those 21 pressures would have been sixth on the Bills in 2021. Again, fun from a rotational guy who's coming in to fill a need, to fill a niche. I like some of the film that you see from him. Again, this isn't a guy who, he's not commanding 60 or 50% of the snaps all the time, but you put him with an Ed Oliver and a re-signed Harrison Phillips, and now you've got this cool rotation where you've got Ed as that 3 tech, you've got Austin Johnson as a 1 tech, you've got Harrison Phillips who can moonlight in both duties and spot both, and now you've got this fun kind of rotation. And then if you function in and funnel in Starr and Ilianku and Justin Zimmer or wherever else you want to do, now you've got a grouping that has that rock, paper, scissors ability. You can mix and match and play different things. And, maybe the Bills are playing this super crazy spread pass heavy team this week and Austin Johnson only sees 10 snaps. And then next week, the Colts come to town again, and you have to play the Colts, and Austin Johnson sees like 60% of snaps because we know the Colts are going to try and run at you right in the interior, things like that. Just that ability to keep playing mix and match, rock, paper, scissors. But again, whether it's Noddy or Austin Johnson or Eric's guy, Daquan Jones, any of these types of guys, I think the need is there. And I like what you said with the 1A, 1B. This was very close for me. I came close to ranking defensive tackle above corner for me. I think they're very much a 1A, 1B. And that's the reason I would be okay with Jordan Davis at 25. It's the same reason I'd be okay with Devontae Wyatt, who I also want to mention. I think a lot of people just think Devontae Wyatt is a 3-tech. He can do a lot of everything on the defensive line. He lines up at the 3. He lines up at 2. He lines up in a 4-eye. He lines up at nose. He lines up in 1. He does everything on that defensive line.
Literally everything.
Literally everything. He lines up like out wide and rushes like an edge at times.
Yeah.
That he can do so much. And I don't think he's completely suited to be like a full functioning 1-tech or nose, but
if you pair him with Harrison Phillips, then it's a match made in heaven. He doesn't have to do it full time. He can, like you said, he can float around in there.
And you got a guy who's fresh, who can function in that world and that role, and you can rotate out and keep everybody going. And so I'd be fine with Devontae Wyatt. I'd be fine with Travis Jones. But it's just, I think the scarcity of the defensive tackle position that we're looking for in the draft is legitimate.
It is.
Which makes me think like, you almost have to solely focus on that and grab it, because the odds of you getting one of those defensive tackles in the draft, to me, it's kind of slim. So I think this position has to be addressed in free agency, given the role that you need and what's available on the market. And again, our big thing too is affordability, right? Like you can fill this need at defensive tackle without having to go like 5 years, $50 million. You can sign somebody on a 1-year, 2-year deal with a 3 to 5 average annual value, and you can fill that need and functionality, and boom, boom, you're good to go. So that's right there. And thank you so much, Traz. Super chat donation is always appreciated, but also the really kind words, man. He says, pardon the interruption, but that like button looks real enticing. How about we all hit that? We would appreciate that from you guys. I mentioned in the intro, I know it's corny, and I know it's corny to say I know it's corny because I say it every friggin' week. You would be shocked to know how much likes go towards helping myself, Disguise Coverage, the channel, all of us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears because of those likes and how they affect the algorithm. So please hit that like while you're here watching it. It means a lot to us. And oh man, Ned coming through with another super chat. Thank you so much, Ned. You're always awesome. He says, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for the homework you do and share with us. Agree with defensive tackle free agency versus the draft. And thanks again. No, thank you, Ned. Like, 1, for the money. Appreciate it. 2, the kind words. We put a lot of effort. I almost said a swear there. We put a crap ton of effort into the homework and the research that we do for anything you see on any show on Cover One, anything you see posted on Twitter. It comes from metrics and analytics and tons of film study, and marrying those two things together to form proper takes and analysis and viewpoints and breakdowns. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and the kind words and donations are a lot of what, allows us to continue to do that and keeps us going. So really appreciate that, Ned. Thank you very much. Oh, and Sean coming through saying, Anthony, I really enjoy your personality and takes. I appreciate you, Sean. Thank you very much. It's very nice, kind words from you guys. You guys are very supportive. We appreciate the hell out of you more than you possibly know. Kendall, we've each gone with our priority 1 and our priority 2 and the targets that we would like to see the Bills go after in free agency. Now we're on to priority 3. What do you got?
Priority 3 was tough. I actually want to know, it was tough for you too?
Because there's a lot of like you mentioned
needs.
Yes. And like corner and defensive tackle, like you mentioned, those are like 1A, 1B.
Obvious.
So boom, good to go. And then 3, I wrestled with 1 on defense and 2 on offense. But then I obviously settled on 1. But yes, I went back and forth. It was tough.
Yeah, I was in between edge, wide receiver, running back, and interior offensive line. There were 4 up for grabs here. I think all are important, but at the end of the day, priority 3 is really preference. It's preference based. I think it depends what your philosophy on team building is. And
Jessica says punter.
Punter is honestly
which is legit. That could be one.
Totally
like, no joke.
3. Yeah, no joke at all. I was laughing, but
Oh,
no joke.
Vito says the same thing too. Priority 3 is punter slash
Punter
holder, right?
slash holder. You got to make sure you get holder in there too. But yeah, I had a really tough time with this one. I ended up splitting it between edge and wide receiver, but I'm just going to talk about edge. The only reason I brought up wide receiver is because Jamison Crowder was just released, and I think he would be a perfect fit for the Bills
Especially if Beasley goes.
if
Yeah.
Beasley is traded. So that's really the only reason I like anecdotally popped wide receiver in there.
Jamison
No,
Crowder.
but yeah, I mean, Jamison Crowder just seems like he would fit so perfectly. The dude's been so productive without a good quarterback.
Everywhere,
It's
even going back to his
everywhere.
Washington days, like
Exactly.
he just keeps getting open.
He's a
And
playmaker.
yeah, legit. And I like that. Yeah, that's very fair.
Probably cheap too. But anyways, I'll get on to edge. So the thing with edge is the reason it's priority number 3 for me is not necessarily because we need more sacks, we need more production, we need better, like not all that stuff. It has more to do with the room. And I guess that's my prevailing thought on all of these. Like I picked defensive tackle first because it's just so much thinner than cornerback, and cornerback is really thin too. So that ends up being my number 2. So yeah, I guess number 3 is edge because of that same thought. It's because of the room, and the room isn't necessarily thin because it has those 3 young guys in Boogie Basham, Groot, and AJ Epinesa. Those are 3 guys that could develop into great talents in Buffalo. But the reason I feel like it needs to be addressed in free agency and it's priority number 3 is because we have to make sure we pair them with a veteran mentor. We can't go into the draft without anyone that's going to mentor these guys outside of Eric Washington. It can't just be him. It has to be someone at the player level as well. So, like if you go into the draft and you're just like, okay, we got these 3 guys that are under 25 years old, and you know what, we're gonna throw a 22-year-old in there too, and it's just gonna work dandy. Like, yeah, that works in Madden, but like, will it work in real life?
Like, I'd
So
love to add Boye Mafe, but then I'm like,
yeah.
does that work? Like, I'd love Jermaine Johnson. Actually, I think that one would work completely without any doubt. But yeah, that's fair. Like, what does it do to the room? How does it fit? Yeah.
Boye Mafe is a good one too, because he definitely could use some polish. Like you add him to the room, it's like he's not necessarily teaching anyone. He's like asking those
He
guys to
needs to
teach
learn.
him.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't necessarily want AJ Epinesa teaching our rookie. So
because AJ Epinesa still needs to be taught.
Exactly.
So, like, what do you do?
He's still learning how to win with his body type and all that stuff. So it comes back to me. It comes back to Jerry Hughes.
That's why I pulled it. I figured.
It comes back to Jerry Hughes. I keep looking at all of these free agent edge options, and there are a ton of dudes. Like, oh my God, I totally understand why anyone would say we don't need to bring back Jerry. There's so many guys that are productive out there. A lot of people want Emmanuel Ogbah from the Dolphins.
His
and
pressure rates aren't as good as you think they are. Everyone.
And I'll get to that. And that's the thing. It's like these guys are all great, and they get more sacks than Jerry, and some of them are, I can't deny this, better against the run. But with where Groot finished this year, oh my God, dude led defensive ends in stops, in run defense stops as a rookie. Like, I'm telling you, all defensive ends, not just rookies. He led all defensive ends in run stops. And
he was 5th in run stop win rate amongst all edges.
He was special against the run. And obviously, I think we've all seen what he can be in pass rushing scenarios. So I think there's a lot to be had with the young dudes on the roster. I just want to pair them with a veteran pass rushing specialist. And I think that dude is Jerry Hughes. So I'll get into the numbers on Jerry Hughes, even though I'm sure people will give me flack for this.
He doesn't have sacks, Kendall, so he sucks.
Why do you do this to me? This is why
I forgot that I said that I was going to troll you earlier.
This is why you're the older brother who bullies me and runs me over with toy cars.
I almost picked that gift. I really thought it was funny, but I was like, I'll go with
perfect
first. Yeah, it was good. Well done.
All right. So I want to bring him back because I want to bring him back in that role where he's a 34-year-old edge rusher. He shouldn't be on the field a lot. And I think, this is actually a good thought. I had this thought about him and retiring because it's definitely a component. Some people probably think he could retire. I'll jump into this first, I guess. The thing with him retiring is you have to look at it from the human component. And when you're human, you innately compare yourself to other humans. And when you're a football player, You compare yourself to other football players. And I think where he's comparing himself in terms of pass rushing metrics, and he sees himself 9th in pass rush win rate amongst all defensive ends with 50% of qualifying pass rush snaps. 9th on someone who gets limited snaps as a pass rusher. That is really good stuff.
He was 46th in pass rush snaps in 2021.
So you compare yourself. You compare yourself to your peers and you're like, oh, I'm 9th. I'm 33 years old. And then you also compare yourself to your peers in the environment that you're in. You're in Buffalo, where you've 2 years now been so close to that penultimate goal, and the goal that he's been chasing his entire career, ringless career. And he's been so close to it twice now in his last 2 years. I don't think he's going to hang up the cleats knowing how close he is and how productive he's been. So I don't think retirement is on the table, but that's me looking from the outside in. It's me just looking at it from
he could also be, I was thinking of this earlier too, he might be like, I'm either coming back to Buffalo or I'm retiring. Like,
exactly.
It could be as simple as that too.
Exactly. So I think it is that. I actually think it is as simple as that. I think Buffalo is his one-stop shop for getting that ring. So it is what it is. Hopefully he comes back, but I will tell you why I want him back. And it has to do with all of those metrics. Like I said, 9th in pass rush win rate, 19.1% of the time when he's rushing the passer, he is successful.
Tell everyone, well, I guess I can just say pass rush win rate means you are beating your block within 2.5 seconds. So he did that, whatever the percentage is. I think it was around like something 40-something%, maybe a little higher.
For the amount of times that he did that?
Yeah, for like, because he was 9th in pass rush win rate, but do you know what the percentage was?
The number was 19.1.
Oh, so 19.1. Oh, you know what was 46? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
the Bills,
that's high. Oh my god.
The Bills as a team were 6th in pass rush win rate.
That makes
2021 at 46%.
As a team,
which
that
again,
makes more sense. I was like, if one singular dude is doing it almost half the time,
fault.
That's nuts.
My fault. Yeah, it was the team 6 overall, which again, Jerry's a large part of that. I feel like people don't realize how many pressures and pass rush win rate that the team had.
So I wanted to show this on relating it to your peers, because I think that resonates with a lot of people when you relate it to the players that he's better than. And he has a better pass rush win rate than Matthew Judon. This is all 2021. Matthew Judon, Shaq Barrett, Josh Allen, not the quarterback, Jadeveon Clowney, Melvin Ingram, who is also a free agent, and Chandler Jones, who is also a free agent. So I know people, and Jadeveon Clowney is also a free agent. Those three guys, Clowney, Ingram, and Jones, I know those are guys that people are looking at as, oh, that's a more athletic dude. That's a dude that can get after the passer and really create some havoc, get some sacks. But Jerry Hughes has a better pass rush win rate than all three of those free agents. And I even threw in guys like Matthew Judon, Shaq Barrett, and Josh Allen, who are guys that people, look highly of. So, and then I broke it down from a total pressures perspective. And I know it's this whole argument about pressures versus sacks, and we can get into that. But before we get into that, you have to understand that pressures generate some sense of frantic nature from the quarterback, and it impacts the quarterback. It's not 100% certain that it's going to generate a negative play, but it is more likely, and that's the key. He had 395 pass rush snaps total this season, 395. On those 395 snaps, he had 55 total pressures, and that's including his 4 sacks. Total pressures include the sacks.
Yeah, it's sacks plus hits plus hurries.
Yes. So that all needs to be accounted for here. So I will use the first one is Emmanuel Ogbah. He's someone who had more pressures than Jerry Hughes, right? Ooh. He had 6 more pressures than Jerry Hughes, but he had 129 more opportunities to do so.
Whew.
Now, we will jump into the guys that didn't have as many pressures and had more snaps. These players include Jadeveon Clowney. He had 2 fewer pressures with 27 more snaps. Nothing crazy there. Not a huge disparity, but it's 2 less pressures, 27 more snaps. Brian Burns, 4 less pressures, 76 more snaps. Melvin Ingram, 4 fewer pressures, 65 more snaps. Cam Jordan, 4 fewer pressures, 150 more snaps. Cam Jordan. And lastly, Chandler Jones had 8 fewer pressures on 106 more snaps. When you break it down from the opportunities that Jerry Hughes had to impact the quarterback, he was one of the most successful in the league in doing so, so much so that he was ranked top 10. And that cannot be denied. I understand people want more from him. People want more sacks from him. So do I. But impacting the quarterback is part of the game. Getting that pressure is part of doing your 111th. Finishing is really following through on that 111th. And we all want it from him. But generating that pressure leads to good things. And getting a guy on a contract like what's probably going to be $4 or $5 million to come back to Buffalo
Could
at
be
a
less.
premier position. Like, that's an expensive position to pay. And if you're getting that much production out of 400 snaps, you're getting your money's worth. So give me Jerry Hughes back in Buffalo, please.
My thing with the pressures is,
don't do this.
No, I'm not going to troll them. I'm saying I was like, they're worthless. No, sacks are one potential negative outcome for an offense that results from a pressure. The other negative outcomes are an incompletion, intentional grounding, a throwaway, a rush throw, an interception. There are a multitude of other negative things that can happen for a pressure. It's the reason why quarterbacks' completion percentage and ratings and everything, yards per attempt, all that stuff all goes down when they're under pressure. The Kansas City Chiefs game in the playoffs, the divisional round, the Bills pressured Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes just made Patrick Mahomes plays and avoided sacks and danced and did his thing, much like Josh Allen does when you've got guys like Chase Young and Chris Jones and Frank Clark and multitudes of good rushers from a multitude of teams who beat their man and get into the backfield, and Josh Allen makes a play and just beats it. Sometimes that happens. And the Kansas City Chiefs game, it happened over and over and over again. Do not let that cloud your judgment from the fact that the Bills were a good pass rushing team in 2021. So, like I mentioned, the Bills were sixth as a group in pass rush win rate in 2021. They were 11th in sacks. 11th. They were almost top 10 in sacks. I feel like
we need more, though. It's got to be top 5.
I mean, would that be awesome? Yes. Would it be fantastic if the Bills had a 15 sack guy, or they were in top 5 in sacks, or you saw more tangible raw stats? Yes, that would be fantastic. But you know what I'll also take? I will take a pressure that leads to, let me dump it in the turf because I don't want to take a sack, right? And here's something that I think is funny as well. So you have adjusted sack rate. Aaron Quinn has talked about this a lot. Adjusted sack rate, a measurement from Football Outsiders. It takes sacks plus intentional grounding penalties, and it puts them per pass attempt adjusted for down, distance, and opponent. The Bills were 7th in adjusted sack rate per Football Outsiders, right? So they're 6th in pass rush win rate, which is an ESPN metric. They're 7th in adjusted sack rate, which is a Football Outsiders metric. They're good at PFF's metrics as well. You go to all these different sites and all these analytical groups, and they all keep telling you the same thing, that the Bills grouping is better than you think. And then if you just want to go raw stats, that's completely fine. They were 11th in sacks. And if you want to come and say, well, a bunch of them came against the Jets, okay, fine, understood. Are you also making that argument for Chandler Jones when 5 of his sacks came against the Tennessee Titans in week 1 of this past year?
Right.
Are you doing that? Because then you have to do that. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Hold everybody up to that same critical lens that you hold the Bills to and all the Bills players to. And the Bills were a better pass rushing group than people give them credit for. I have some other numbers on Jerry Hughes that I wanted to share because I think they're important. This is the one I tweeted, and you were like, brace yourself, Ant. And I was like, no, nobody cares about my tweets. So you mentioned Jerry Hughes, right? So he had 55 pressures this past year in 2021, which was 18th out of all edge players with, I think, 50 pass rush snaps. I forgot what metric. I filtered it down. So he had 55 pressures, which was 18th, and 395 pass rush snaps, which was 46th. He had a pressure rate of 13.9%. Okay. TJ Watt, arguably the best edge rusher in football. He had 67 pressures and 23 sacks. So 23 of his 67 pressures were all in sacks, which is cool. He had 449 pass rush snaps. So 54 more pass rush snaps than Jerry Hughes. and he only had 12 more pressures. His pressure rate was 14.9, so only 1 percentage point higher than Jerry Hughes. Max Crosby, 108 pressures, led the league. 626 pass rush snaps, which was the third most, and he had a pressure rate of 17.3, so basically 3.4 percentage points higher than Jerry Hughes. Nobody's saying Jerry Hughes is the premier end-all, be-all pass rusher, but you take those numbers, you take the metrics that you brought up, right? He's got a better pressure rate than a lot of these guys that a lot of Bills fans are clamoring for to come into the door and come into the room, which I get the sack component, right? But if Jerry Hughes had like, I don't know, 7 or 8 sacks, this isn't a conversation because now he's almost a double-digit sack guy who is 9th in pass rush win rate, who has a good pressure percentage, who is good in PFF's PRP, who does all these different things.
You know what else?
Tell me.
If he had 8 sacks, we might not even be able to afford to bring him back.
Oh, that's actually a really good point.
Like, we should be thankful that he only had 4 sacks because now we can afford him for all those teams that are using raw metrics like stats that are looking at, or like sacks that are looking at it as the end all be all reason to go sign a guy. When he only has 4 sacks, it's like, man, he can't finish. But we know what he is in Buffalo. We know that he's a disruptor in the pass rush.
Yes.
So there's value to that, and we'll be able to get it at a discount because he didn't get those sacks.
Huge point. Like, sacks equal bigger checks and bigger monetary value.
Jordan Phillips is an example of that.
Jordan Phillips is a very good example of that. He got paid. And you also look at PRP, which is PFF's metric of sacks, hits, and hurries relative to how many times someone rushes the QB. So out of the 157 edge players who have at least 50 pass rush snaps, Jerry Hughes was ranked 36th out of 157. He's like a top 35 rusher in that one metric, which is still pretty good considering there's 157, right? And then if you look at all the other individual ones we mentioned, he's still a very effective player. He is also who I want to bring in for my priority number 3, which is also edge, mainly because 1, I think he does more than people realize, but 2, you're not getting a better edge rusher than Jerry Hughes unless you really, really break the bank. And then even so, there's still guys like, I love Hassan Reddick. Jerry Hughes' pressure percentages and pressures are similar, if not better, than Hassan Reddick in several metrics. Now, Hassan Reddick has way more sacks, and I like his burst, and I like his ability to win one-on-one, and I know he'll get home. He's also probably going to cost like $15 million a year, and the Bills can't afford that. So all these better pass rushers that you want, quote-unquote, better, the Bills aren't going to be able to contend for those guys. They're not paying those guys. They're not going to be able to acquire them. The only way they get like a quote-unquote premier pass rusher is what a lot of you guys have said in the chat tonight, is if Chandler Jones is like, you know what, I want to play for kind of my hometown, I'll take a discount and come here and play. And maybe he's the rumored guy that Albert Breer talked about. Maybe he's one of those 2 defensive guys. Maybe he comes and says, all right, cool. I think the Bills are really good. I think we can win a ring there. I think I can help. I want to play for them. Hey, Brandon Beane, what kind of deal would work for you? Okay, that's a little too much. This is what would work for me. All right, cool. We can come to an agreement, dap up. We're good. I'm going to sign, right? Unless that happens, he's getting paid. All these guys on the edge market, edge rushers, top edge rushers, they cost big time money.
Yeah.
You saw the deal that Harold Landry got. He had a good year last year from a sack percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Those dudes get paid. TJ Watt, paid. Max Crosby, paid. Hendrickson paid. Carl Lawson even got paid. Like, those edge rushers get buku bucks. The Bills cannot live in that world. So bring somebody back that is familiar with the team, the scheme, is a good culture guy, is a leader. You know he wants to be here and he's bought in and he has the buy-in of the coaching staff and you have his buy-in individually. The players look up to him. He's more productive than you realize. And also some things I wanted to mention about this edge position group. So again, I want Jerry, much like you do, because I think he's better than people think. And I also think the edge market is kind of scarce in terms of what you want. Like, if you're in this Jerry Hughes range in terms of money, you're looking at guys like Derek Barnett and all these other guys who have way less pressure rates and worse pressure percentages and who don't have the consistent impact that Jerry has. They may have some better flashy numbers, but they're not as consistent. You got to live in that world. You can do way worse than Jerry. If you're trying to do way better, the Bills don't have the money for that. Boom. But the reason why I think it's a need, you touched on some of it. I like what Groot did in 2021 from a run stop perspective. Again, he was 5th in run stop win rate, which means you are either beating your blocker, disrupting the pocket, or the run lane by pushing your blocker back. You're either containing the running back so they have to adjust their rush lane, or you make a tackle within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. So he was 5th amongst all edge players in run stop win rate. Also, fun fact for defensive tackles, Harrison Phillips was 8th in run stop win rate, and Ed Oliver was 9th. So fun stuff there on the defensive line. But nobody thought Groot was going to have the impact against the run that he did, and he had a really great year against the run. He's still putting together pass rush technique and plan and moves, right? I'm not ready to come in and say that Groot is going to be a force in the pass rush perspective from the edge. I'm also not ready to say that about AJ Epinesa. I thought he'd take a bigger leap in 2021 than he did. Maybe he didn't because he wasn't getting a lot of reps, so on and so forth. But either way, AJ Epinesa isn't a sure thing. I'm not very high on Boogie Basham. I think what we saw from him last year isn't his complete ceiling, but I don't think he's jumping much more than what we've seen. He's already a little bit older. We'll see what he does in terms of what kind of transformation he undergoes this offseason. Maybe he changes a little bit one way or the other. I'm not low on him. I think he's a high floor guy, but he's a low ceiling guy. I think the type of player that you can hope that he's going to be is like a Shaq Lawson type.
Yeah.
Maybe he gets you like 5-6 sacks a year, but your hope is he can set the edge. Maybe he can offer you more inside versatility than Shaq Lawson. But again, you're looking at Groot, Basham, Epinesa, and Mike Love. Your edge rushing group, there is no proven one-on-one pass rush winner in that edge grouping. You need to address that position, whether it's Jerry, it's not going to happen now, but whether Jermaine Johnson falls or Ojabo falls and you think there's like these sick like edge rushers that need to be had, you need proven pass rush productivity from the edge perspective. The Bills don't have it. And even if you look at the numbers, right? Jerry Hughes led the Bills in pressures with 55. He's a free agent. You know who was 3rd? Mario Addison was 3rd with 38. He's a free agent. 26% of the Bills' total pressures from 2021 were in Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison. They're both free agents. We know the Bills love to rotate. The Bills were one of 7 teams without a defensive lineman that had more than 60% of snaps in 2021. Ed Oliver led the team with 57.8. Jerry Hughes was 2nd at 51.8. Mario Addison was 4th at 44.7. You've lost pressures. You've lost snaps. You've lost a multitude of functionality in your edge grouping. And like you mentioned earlier, you've definitely lost a veteran presence. This grouping, I think people aren't thinking enough about edge because they see Groot had an awesome rookie year. Basham's still young. We got Epinesa. He's not great, but we could see what happens. We'll be fine. I strongly disagree. Like, I am not worried, but I am concerned about the edge position. And it's my firm 3. The only way it's not 3, if Cole Beasley goes, wide receiver jumps to... I honestly wouldn't have a problem putting wide receiver as number 1 because I think you need to do whatever you can to support Josh Allen. But wide receiver definitely creeps into the top 3. But until that happens, I think edge is a bigger need than people realize because I just don't think Groot and Basham and Epinesa are ready to shoulder the pass rushing burden from an edge position. And that's not a negative right against Groot because I don't want everybody to get upset and talk about how great he is and how young and this and that. Dude's only played defensive end like 2 years. 1 year at Miami and 1 year for the Bills. He's like 4 years removed from being a safety and a wide receiver. He's young in terms of age, but he's young in terms of experience. That you don't just win with raw talent in the NFL. You need technicality. You need moves. You need an understanding of leverage and how to play, what to do in different scenarios. He's not ready for that. I don't think definitely that Basham is ready for that. I definitely don't think Epinesa is ready. There's some missing pieces in this edge grouping. I feel like people aren't talking about it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking to do it like only in the draft and do it early in the draft. And I think that it's understandable because like we said, it is weak. There is not a lot of proven talent in that room, but adding another guy who's not a proven talent isn't necessarily the answer. Adding a Aiden Hutchinson to this group, if that was even possible for us, isn't necessarily the answer though, because it's then it's just 4 young guys. Like, yeah, we have Aiden Hutchinson, but are we then really confident in group being able to play full-time snaps or Epinesa being able to play full-time
And
snaps. And
even
that's the
that, you're
thing.
banking on like the draft is still a crapshoot. Even the
Exactly.
best like players can still not have that impact. What if everybody's wrong and Hutchinson's a bust? And then it's like, well, crap. Like you
Exactly.
still don't know. You need proven, right?
Exactly. And that's why I think we want to bring Jerry back, because we know what we're going to get from him. We know what the floor is with him, and I think it's reliable and it's a value for us. There's something I want to address real quick. Comment from Jason Taylor, and it's honestly my fault that I didn't really set the table well enough. He said if Jerry had 8 sacks and you question the affordability of re-signing him, Addison had 7, and we're not questioning the affordability of signing him. And I think the difference here is the context of Jerry Hughes and all of the pressure
I
metrics
was
that
gonna
we
say,
talked
yeah.
about. It's that if Jerry had all of these pressure metrics we're talking about, where he's like literally top 20 in everything, and there's nothing he's below that in, but he only has 4 sacks, there's, that dampens his value. If he has all of that and 8 sacks, where you're like, oh my God, this dude can get after the passer and he can finish and make a play. The difference with Addison is he had those 7 sacks, but he also wasn't really winning as much. He didn't create as much pressure when he was out there. The productivity and the efficiency as a pass rusher isn't there, despite having a higher sack number. So he won't necessarily earn more money than Hughes because he had more sacks, but it will make his market value higher than it otherwise would have been if he had 4 sacks. Because like we said, it writes your check. Having the amount of sacks that you have as an edge rusher is very, very important, but it is not the end all be all for what your market value is. It's just a part of the puzzle. And I think it's probably the most important part of the puzzle, but it's not the only part of the puzzle.
Oh, very well said. Yeah, again, it's the full. I feel like the conversation has really gone with pressures with it, but I think it's in everything. But we'll just use pressures as the example. It's the context of all of it. Like no one is saying that just look at pressures. No one is saying just look at sacks. You have to look at everything collectively and holistically. Like how many pressures do they have? Okay, how many sacks do they have? Okay, how are they winning? Okay, how many times are they rushing? What scenarios are they rushing? Are they on pass rush downs? But are they really pass rushing, or are they more like a spiker on a stunt? And so they're just trying to clear space for someone else. How many snaps are just one-on-one? How many snaps are they really trying to get? There's so much to it, right? There's so many levels and layers. And I think that's a fair point or a fair question from Jason. But yes, it's in that scenario, we were adding the sacks for Jerry on top of what he already had, right? Because then also in that area, right, if you add on sacks, that also adds into the pressure metrics. So now he's got over 60 pressures. His pressure rate goes up.
Yeah.
His total pressures go up. He's almost double-digit sacks. He's a proven guy. He's a good culture guy. People are going to pay for that type of thing.
Yeah.
We're adding that on. It's not a replacing type of thing. It's you're adding it on, and all of a sudden it's like, well, look at that. And then you've got Super Bowl contenders who are like, you know what? We could do a lot worse than throwing some money at a veteran who can win with metrics and who wins on tape and then who had almost 8 sacks. Cool. Let's give them X amount of dollars. Bills can't live in that world. It's a very interesting time for the Bills as we head to this offseason. And as I throw up the banner for Toodles, you guys, because we're starting to wind down here on Disguise coverage and we are going to say goodbye shortly. But we've already started to see some of the moving and the shaking, the Russell Wilson trade, the franchise tags coming down. Once you start to see the franchise tags, those are always like the first dominoes. We've seen those. We've seen Klein get released. We've seen Feliciano. Things are just beginning for the Buffalo Bills. You're going to continue to hear more rumors. And, so-and-so wants to come to Buffalo and so-and-so was spotted with this. I want to caution everybody with those rumors and not getting yourself too hyped up or too excited. I tweeted out a quote from Brandon Beane from his interview on GR the other day where he was talking about their interest in JJ Watt last year. And he said, quote, like they never really went down the road. And he was like, the problem is, I'm paraphrasing now, but he said, the problem is, once you talk to a guy, you get flagged as being interested in that guy, but nobody ever talks about the depth or the context of it. So they don't talk about, well, did you call him and have 2, conversations with him? Or were you going in for like an 8-day tough negotiation with that player? You don't get any of that. So they did their due diligence on JJ, but his exact words, they never really went far down the road with him. Keep that in mind with everyone. if it's like, well, the Bills are interested in so and so, that could just mean they literally called to be like, hey, what about Timmy? All right, cool, never mind, hang up. But that gets recorded as like well, the Bills are interested in Timmy because they called about Timmy. Keep that in mind. There's going to be a ton of this, right? The Bills are now a real player in the NFL. The Bills are going to be one of those teams that get listed for everything, that get talked about on TV. People are going to be like, oh, here's free agent A. Where do you think he fits? Buffalo, and here's why. The Bills are not a sexy team, but they're a high-profile team now because of the years they've had, because of Josh Allen. You're going to hear a ton of activity, so keep your bearings. Try and stay level-headed, but also know, like we've seen, Kendall, we saw Klein go, we saw Feliciano go. The Bills have some ways to clear some cap space, and they also want to make moves. We know Brandon Beane likes to make moves in free agency so they could go into the draft with that best player available mindset. So there is some moving and shaking that can happen over the next week, and then once we get into free agency on Monday.
Yeah, I mean that's honestly the name of the game. It's enabling yourself to still draft BPA, and I think the position group that got left out of here was interior offensive line, and with Feliciano getting released right before we went live, it's definitely a position that needs to be addressed before the draft, so you're not forced to take a guy in round one when you otherwise don't want to. That's not Beane's MO. His MO is make sure you fill all of those needs, secondary or primary needs. Make sure you fill them in some way, shape, or form. That way you aren't pigeonholed into drafting certain positions in certain rounds. You don't want to have to do that to yourself. You want to stay as true to your board as you possibly can. Hopefully not so true that you double down on two positions in one draft, but hopefully we'll see him get a little bit more spread of the wealth this year.
I really want Basham to do well because of that embedded video and how much
I liked Basham
wanted him
this whole time. I was higher on Basham than Russo, but it was probably because of the floor thing. It really was.
Fair.
Like I was so much more sure.
Well, yeah,
about
Russo
what Basham
could be this, or he could be way down there, and
exactly.
You got no idea.
But I'm with you on what you said about Basham.
I liked some of the tape. I also really hated some of it, and yeah, he could still be something. Like you never know, and that's also part of it too. Like we can't. That's part of the reason why I think edge is a need, because you still don't know what any of these rookies are going to be. You don't really know what someone's going to be until like year 3 of who they are, I mean, even towards the end of year 3. So you really have that sample size and production. Like Groot could take off, or he could fall off the face of the earth. Same thing with Basham. Even still, same with AJ Epinesa to a degree going into like year 3. There's so much variability at that position. And that's a premium position for anyone, but especially a Bills team that likes to rotate on the defensive line and wants to primarily rush for and wants to play nickel defense with light boxes. You need dudes who can rock across that entire defensive line on the interior, like we talked about, but also on that edge. And it's tough to just hand the crown over to a bunch of young guys who haven't worn that yet. Like heavy lies the crown is a phrase for a reason. And it's going to be exciting, though. The Bills are a good football team at the end of the day. There's possibilities for them in free agency to really set the table as we move towards the draft here. And I'm very thankful for that Bills team and for where they are and who they can be. And I'm also very thankful for you, Mr. Kendall Mirsky. You crushed it tonight, as always. I had a blast with you last night on the film room, and I was very excited to do this episode of Disguise Coverage with you. Your first time here on Disguise Coverage. And you were phenomenal, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, hopefully not the last, man. I had a great time talking with you again 2 nights in a row. It's been awesome. I'm so intrigued with how this free agency is going to play out. Happy to talk about it with you and really happy to see how it plays out, because I've talked to you about this. I haven't even done a lick of work on tight ends or like safeties or linebackers or anything like that for the draft, because why would I waste my time on that? I don't think the Bills are necessarily pigeonholed to draft those positions until I know what they do before the draft. So really excited to see how all of those positions get played out. Really excited to see how all that stuff plays out. Hopefully people don't unfollow me for saying I like ranch.
It's fair, man.
Yeah, I appreciate being on the show,
it's
man.
Fair. No, hell yeah. You crushed it. I guess while you're there, tell everybody where they can find you, what you do, and all that kind of stuff.
So you can find me on Twitter at Mirsky Kendall. Just tweeting a lot of draft film, a lot of analysis on draft stuff. I'll probably be probably be dropping wide receiver rankings next. If I had to guess, I'm a long way from done with it, but that's probably the next position group I would be dropping.
Okay.
And then you can find me on live streams, obviously on the Cover One Sports Network YouTube channel on Mondays with Air Raid Hour, Tuesdays with you and our boy Eric in the film room, and then Thursdays again on the Air Raid Hour. So yeah, you can find me all around Cover One during this off season. And yeah, happy to be a part of the team. Happy to contribute.
You are fantastic in a lot of ways. And again, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I had a blast, much like I did last night, which, we mentioned it a couple times, but we should probably plug it again. Kendall and I did a film room episode last night on several wide receiver targets for the Buffalo Bills. We know wide receiver is a hot topic now with the Cole Beasley news. It was already kind of a little positional need anyway, but with the Cole Beasley news, even more so. We broke down Garrett Wilson, Jahan Dotson, Sky Moore, Wan'Dale Robinson. We touched on Kyle Phillips and Velus Jones, film, analytics, metrics, all that kind of stuff. So go check out that film room and get some insight into the wide receiver class of 2022, and also how we look at wide receivers, how we scout them, what traits we look for, what's important. It was a really good time. And Kendall, I had a blast with you and everybody who was here live riding with us. Thank you guys so much. I've started pulling up all these comments and words of praise. Again, you guys mean a tremendous amount to us. You mean the world. Without you guys, we would have nothing at all. So thank you very much to anyone and everyone who rode with us live on this episode. If you were not riding live with us and you watch this episode later, listen to it later, whenever have you, thank you so much for your listen, your view, your download. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on whatever app or podcasting platform you are listening to. If you're here on YouTube, please drop a like, whether you're now watching live or you're watching live, not watching live, watching recorded later, anything and everything. Please drop a like. It helps us a tremendous amount. And thank you very much for every ounce of support. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for everybody. Any kind words that you guys mentioned in the show to myself and Kendall, we appreciate the hell out of it. And tell your friends, family, loved ones all about Disguise Coverage, about Cover One. If you thought the show was terrible and you think Cover One sucks, cool. Tell your enemies about us. All press is good press. Appreciate you guys so much. Kendall, appreciate you. You crushed it as always.
Thanks,
everyone, I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well. I hope you all stay safe. I will see you next week for free agency as things kick off Monday. People can start talking. We'll get some deals that are talked about. Wednesday, things happen official. It's a big week next week, which I will definitely see you for. And as always, go Bills.